words of my lips and the meditations of all our hearts be now and always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. It is good to be back. It was good to have a time of rest, but it is good to be back. And it is so good to be here. I didn't even realize what it was going to mean to be worshiping in this space until we had begun. And I am so glad that we are working on a plan so that you can be here too. And I am glad that we have figured out how to be together in this way, so that even when we are open to the public for worship again, we will also have this new thing that we've learned how to do, so that our church family, separated by distance or by vulnerability, can be reunited in ways that we couldn't be before. It is good to be here. Although for the last 8 years, I have spent this third Sunday in August at a church in Whitby for the morning and then at the cathedral for evensong as a parent of a singer and the Toronto Diocesan Choir School for Girls, which means that I hardly ever get to preach about this ending to the Joseph story, which is sad because I love this story. I love the God who is revealed in it, this God who stays with Joseph in the pit and in the cell, this God who reveals the divine self in dreams, this God who opens up a path for the people of Egypt to be fed through their years of famine, this God who delights in the final scene, the reunification of a family that has been divided. Because this family was divided long before their little brother was left for dead in a pit and then sold, only to rise and to fall and then rise again in a foreign land. This family was broken by a father playing favorites, by brothers' fear that there would not be enough for all, by jealousy, by violence, and by lies. And only later that they were separated by miles and by years. And still this morning, Joseph weeps on his brother's neck. And his family is reunited in a way that they could not have been before. And Joseph says, God did that. That God does that. God brings together those things that have been torn apart. And this same face of God is revealed in the psalm, where the psalmist sings about how good it is when brothers live together in unity. It's short, but it's sweet. And so it is with this awareness of the heart of God, God's love for unity and the bringing together of divided families, that I hear this difficult passage from Matthew. I mean, jumping right over the part where Jesus tells his disciples not to worry about hand washing. Wash your hands. Yes, by all means, worry even more about what comes out of your mouth. Don't be speaking moistly on your friends and loved ones, but also wash your hands. Kidding aside, though, Jesus is telling his disciples something important about the heart of God. Because Jesus knows the heart of God. Because Jesus is the heart of God. And what he tells them is that observing all the technicalities of the law is not more important than the contents of your heart. And the contents of your heart is made evident in your words and in your actions. We show who we are by what we say and by what we do. And God, who made us, cares very much about who we are. But then no sooner has Jesus said this thing to his disciples when just then, everything is always just then or immediately in Matthew. He is a narrator in a hurry. Just then appears a Syrophoenician woman. Now here is what Jesus should do according to the cup washers of the world and the ones who are concerned about the technicalities of the law. He should ignore her. They should not speak. And then when his silence does not dissuade her, the disciples urge him to send her away because they do not want to hear what she might have to say. They have no reason to be curious about what might be revealed about the content of her heart. But who Jesus is, the content of his heart and the content of God's heart is made evident in what he says and what he does. So he doesn't ignore her and he doesn't send her away. He engages with her. He begins a conversation. And in the course of that conversation, he gives his disciples no choice but to see and to hear the content of her heart. For them to see and hear that she is smart and she is funny and she gets a joke and she hurls it right back and she is deeply, deeply faithful. Because she has seen Jesus' heart for what it is, the heart of God. And she has come to him to ask him for compassion and healing because she knows who God is and what God does. And so the disciples see, and through them we see, that this woman who does not even try to follow the technicalities of the law still has great faith. And it comes out in her words and in her actions. And so for this one moment, these two people who are separated by gender and by culture and by distance and technically by law are united in ways that they could not have been before. And God, I am quite sure, delights in it. So the reason we keep coming back to these stories is that they are always timely stories. And no less so with this one, as we begin to make our way out of isolation and return to public spaces. As we who have spent so long seeing the same small circle of faces day after day again become people who interact with strangers. Imagine talking to strangers. And it matters. It matters on the small and personal scale. It matters how we speak to and treat one another out here in the world. It matters how we treat the people we've been locked in with all this time, how we care for one another's frayed edges. It matters what we value and what we prioritize as we make our selections from the admittedly distressing array of options that 2020 has provided for us. It matters how we stay curious about other people's stories and experiences. It matters how we stay curious about the content of other people's hearts. It matters how we both individually and collectively, measure the value of the people who are often deemed to be worth less, or even deemed to be worthless, if the job that they do is valued at minimum wage, or if they do not or cannot hold a job at all. I am still angry about a story I heard of someone who walked into a coffee shop and was asked to put on her mask, and who looked around at the two baristas and all the empty tables and said, "Why? There's nobody here." It matters. On a larger scale, as we as a community, as a nation, as we recover from this crisis, as we put our world back together, it matters how we include those who have been excluded. And it matters how we seek justice for those who have been denied it. Canada's nation-to-nation relationships with Indigenous peoples matter. The failure of systems and institutions to honor the inherent dignity of Black lives matters. And it matters because the heart of God knows this to be true. There is no them. There is only us. There is one family of God's children, formed of the dust and gifted with the breath of life and bearing the image of God. One family, divided by playing favorites, by fear that there would not be enough for all, by jealousy, by violence, and by lies. That is the way the world is. But the way the world is not the only way it could be. Our God is a God of healing, a God of transformation, a God who loves justice and who breaks the bonds of the oppressed, a God who asks his disciples to listen and to learn and to hear and to see what is in the heart of a neighbor, a stranger, an enemy. How very good and pleasant it is when kindred live together in unity. It is like the precious oil on the head running down upon the beard of Aaron, running down over the collar of his robes. It is like the dew of Hermon, which falls on the mountains of Zion. For there the Lord ordained his blessing, life forevermore. Thanks be to God.